This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
So I was at the top of this steep section of track looking, thinking, golly, where am I going to put my feet? Because it was very sandy and slippery and I couldn't think, where am I going to step? And before I even took a step, because I was looking down and I had a backpack, it must have altered my centre of gravity. So I'm rolling head over heel down this steep slope and probably 3 metres, and then I landed on my back, sort of jammed up against some rocks. And straight away I had a limp arm and I had tingling in my neck, so I thought, I've banged my neck. I didn't recognise a limp arm is, of course, a sign of a spinal injury.
I'm Georgia, and welcome to Finding Hope, the podcast that finds the good in the midst of the bad. Each episode, we meet someone who's had a bit of a hard time but has found hope and healing along the way. And hopefully they inspire you to embrace the good in your world as well. Episode 25, Amanda Nickson. Have you ever met someone who throws themselves into every opportunity that life gives them? Who lives every moment like it's their last? Amanda Nickson is one of those people. As a social worker, she spends her life advocating for those in need. As a pastor, she shows people what it means to follow God. As a person, she enjoys every moment of her life because it was almost taken away from her. This is a story of living by faith in every sense of the word. Let's meet Amanda.
I was born in Sydney, but I currently live in Townsville with my husband. I've got 3 adult children. One's still living at home with me. I have 2 girls and a boy. And I'm a social worker, is the profession that I've chosen to follow throughout my life. And I'm also a pastor with the Australian Christian Churches.
Wow.
So I'm very blessed that I can do a mix of things at the moment. I run my own business called Interactive Solutions, where I provide a lot of supervision, professional supervision for social workers and human service workers in a number of organisations, but also for pastors and chaplains. So I supervise a lot of chaplains through Scripture Union who are in schools and pastors in the ACC, Australian Christian Church. And I also do contract work as a social worker. So I've just recently taught a subject for James Cook University in their social work course. I'm doing contract adoption assessments for the State Department in Queensland. I can say yes or no to different things that I'm interested to do. So I'm very fortunate that I'm in that position.
Yeah, that's amazing. Why did you choose to be a social worker?
So choosing social work was really a result of my Christian faith and finding out that my mother had a social work degree, that she only went back to her profession when I was 17, and I'd never heard of social work. And I thought, wow, there's this job where you can actually be helping people in need or that are needing help as your job on a daily basis. How good is that? So once I'd heard about social work and found out about it, I thought, yes, that's what I'd love to do.
It's a very easy profession to kind of get, burnt out in. Was there ever a time where you doubted your decision or you wished you hadn't become a social worker?
I've never wished I haven't become a social worker. There have been times where I've deliberately changed jobs because I thought I could be at risk of burning out, and that's where I might have been getting stale in a particular role or very frustrated with limited resources, certain policies, that sort of thing. So the way I've managed it is to look for another job in a different area. So I've often changed roles every few years, and that's kept me fresh by having a different challenge, working for a different group of people, advocating for a different group of people. My passion for social justice has always been there, and social work is a role that allows you to be working in that space, which I love.
What do you think started that passion?
That's a really good question. I'm thinking When I was a young Christian in a youth group, I can remember we used to visit somewhere in inner city Sydney. I can't remember the name of the organisation, but it was some sort of welfare outreach space in an area that had a lot of very disadvantaged young people, which really opened my eyes because I had a very privileged and supported upbringing without challenges like that. And it made me realise, gee, some people don't have support from home, don't have enough opportunity with education, are in poverty, maybe have made some poor choices and have ended up in juvenile justice situations. I can remember our youth group visited a youth detention centre and would provide a barbecue or something like that for some young people, and you just think, wow, people can make really different choices and it can affect their whole life. How good to be in a job where you can try to influence people to make good choices or support them as best you can when they've been in situations where things haven't worked out well.
Do you ever feel the weight of that?
Yes, there's been times where, you can be overwhelmed by how big some of the problems are that people face. And I think often it's because of structural issues. It's not an individual. The individual is in the consequences, but there might be bigger structural inequalities at play, and that can be a bit overwhelming. I think there are many structures in society that can disadvantage some groups of people. So if you're a person of a certain race, you might have less opportunities and experience racism and prejudice when you apply for jobs, when you apply for housing, all sorts of things. You might be born into a situation of poverty where you're the third generation of a family that have lived on income support from an agency like Centrelink. So you're living in rental accommodation, you have no opportunity to purchase a home of your own. You have had limited role models of anyone that works in your family because no one's been able to get a job. So there can be, generations of people that are facing challenges just because of where they've been born. I've certainly seen some people that have defied the odds and been able to go out and get a university education. I can think of a number of refugee families I've worked with where, despite the odds, young people have learnt English as a second language, been able to get a very good education and get amazing jobs and help out their families. But some people are in a trap of poverty and disadvantage, and it's very hard to get out of that position, even with support from different agencies. There's all sorts of challenges around structure.
It's clear that Amanda has a heart for helping those less fortunate than herself. She's passionate about equality and a strong advocate for justice. But she almost lost the chance to do any of it. In 2010, Amanda almost lost her life. You have actually had a near-death experience. Saying that out loud is bizarre. Can you share a little bit about that, please?
I was very fortunate to be able to do a bushwalk, which I love doing with some friends. There were 6 of us, me and my husband and 2 other couples, doing a 5-day hike on a place called Hinchinbrook Island, which is in North Queensland off Cardwell. It's quite a remote and difficult walk. And on the second day, I fell down a steep slope. So I was at the top of this steep section of track thinking, golly, where am I going to put my feet? Because it was very sandy and slippery and I couldn't think, where am I going to step? And before I even took a step, because I was looking down and I had a backpack, it must have altered my centre of gravity. So I'm rolling head over heel.
Oh my gosh.
Down this steep slope. probably only probably 3 metres, and then I landed on my back, sort of jammed up against some rocks. And straight away I had a limp arm and I had tingling in my neck, so I thought, I've banged my neck. But I thought I'd done something to my arm. I didn't recognise a limp arm is, of course, a sign of a spinal injury. And at that point, my husband and the other people with me, they're all trying to assess how seriously injured am I. I'm pretty shaken up. We stop and rest for a while. And I'm thinking, well, I seem to still be able to walk and I don't seem to have a broken arm or leg. But I thought, because at that point in time we had reception on our phones, whereas if we kept going we wouldn't have reception. And so my husband's trying to decide, do I ring for a chopper? Do we need to get you off? And I'm thinking, well, no, I seem to be okay. I'm a bit shaken, but yeah, let's keep going. So that meant I had to keep walking for another 3 days. A lot of the track was really quite tricky, like flooded. You're walking through water trying to find the track. It's quite challenging. And I can remember thinking, I can't do this. I was crying like I was in pain with my neck, and I was wearing a sling because my arm that was limp, I'd keep putting, you put out your arm to balance against a tree or something and it would just go limp, and I had to remind myself I can't use that arm because it's not helping me. And my husband's, prayed for me and said, you can do it. And I can remember at one stage I fell. You're crossing a creek with a whole lot of boulders, and you step on a boulder and it moves. Landed on my backside. So the number of times I fell, even after that initial fall, but this particular time I was just sitting there on my backside thinking, I can't do this. And then I was thinking, God brought to my memory the verse in Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And so I thought, right, I'm going to stand and believe on that promise, that word of God. And so I just stood up and said it out loud. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. 1 step. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Another step. So I just kept saying that word of God out loud as a promise.
Oh my goodness.
And was able to walk for the rest of that day. Got to the campsite exhausted, hours later. But I really believe it was the word of God that got me through that time. And then it wasn't till a couple of days later we finally get off the island, off a ferry, and I thought, gee, my neck's really sore. I'm worried about going back to Townsville because we were getting a minibus the next day to go back. I thought, I'll just ring and make a doctor's appointment with my doctor back home. So I booked one in for when I got back, but still it never entered my mind that my neck was broken. I just thought, I've, done some ligament damage or disc damage. I had no idea what a slip disc felt like. I've never had one. So it never occurred to me it was so serious.
But it was serious. Amanda was shocked to find out just how serious it actually was and how closely she brushed with death.
And then when I finally got back to Townsville, the doctor sent me for an x-ray, and I'm at the x-ray place, finished the x-ray out the front, my mobile phone goes off and my doctor says, Amanda, where are you? And I'm like, outside the x-ray place. And he's like, you need to go straight to emergency. Don't look down, don't look sideways. You have an unstable neck fracture. Go straight there. And I'm just thinking, no. And I've been, tripping and falling so many more times, and I seriously believe God must have had angels holding my neck up so that it didn't snap. I was immediately put at emergency in a neck brace so that I couldn't move. They cut me out of my T-shirt, didn't want to move my neck at all. I had scans, finally had surgery, neurosurgeons who've removed the disc that was squashed and put in a spacer. I've got a titanium plate and 2 screws holding C6, C7 together. And then I was in a halo brace for 3.5 months. So that's where they halo braces where they sort of drill screws into your skull to hold your neck still for 4 months. And that was part of my recovery.
How was that recovery? How are you feeling? Obviously, physically, it's a massive thing to recover from surgery. How are you feeling mentally, emotionally throughout that time? How'd you cope?
I was just so amazed that I'd got off so lightly, because I just thought, wow, God isn't finished with me yet. He must have more for me to do. The fact that he'd spared me and looked after me on that island, because I could be, other people I've met with C6 injuries have had either quadriplegia or paraplegia, and I had nothing. Even when I've gone back to the specialist for checkups, they've said, oh, how are the headaches? And I'm like, what headaches? I don't have any headaches. Like, I've just had no ongoing issues from that injury at all.
How are you now with, you've mentioned you love nature, you feel close to God, bushwalks. Have you been able to go back on tricky bushwalks, or is that was that the end?
Certainly not the end of bushwalking. I'm not as keen to do overnight treks where I'm carrying everything on my back. But since that time I have done the Camino walk in Spain, which is a long walk, but I was fortunate to be able to do it in a way that I only carried a day pack each day, and the rest of my luggage was carried forward with a tour company. So I'm happy to do day walks, carry a little day pack, but I don't particularly plan to do long overnight treks carrying tents and everything else.
I think that's smart. You published a book in March of last year, Living by Faith, How the Impossible Becomes Possible. And this book was inspired by your injury experience, correct?
Yes, I
In
think
part.
a lot of people, when they heard my story about surviving a broken neck, kept saying to me, you should be writing a book. And I'm thinking, no. But eventually I thought, well, actually, yes, I like if my testimony can encourage someone else that God cares for us, God is real, miracles are still happening today. That's what I wanted to do, because I thought, well, I'm no one special. You know, I'm a mum, a wife.
Oh, I don't know. I've just read your bio. You're pretty amazing.
Well, but I just feel like, well, God did that for me, and that's how much God loves all of us. He's prepared to look after his children and look out for them. And I thought, if writing my testimony in a book helps someone else, because, you know, I can share my testimony with people I meet, but that's very limited compared to a book can go to many other places. But it also made me think, well, that's just one of the many miracles God has done in my life. That's just one incident. God's been amazing throughout my whole life. So every chapter I had a different theme about how faithful God has been. And so I've covered things like answering prayer, hearing from God, making decisions, trust, using your talents, the importance of encouragement, sharing your burdens, showing compassion, practicing gratitude. So a whole lot of different areas where I've found my faith has been stretched, but then I've grown in faith by applying different principles. And so every chapter teaches about faith, but it also has examples from my own life about how faithful God is.
I love that. I want to read a bit of an excerpt from chapter
Sure.
1, if you don't mind.
Yes.
So many people made comments about how lucky I was not to be paralysed, that I was not a paraplegic or quadriplegic. Doctors, nurses and friends were amazed that I'd kept going on the hike for another 4 days. I don't believe in luck. I knew that God had looked after me on Hinchinbrook. What a miracle that any of the innumerable trips and stumbles I'd had walking those 20-odd kilometres after my fall with an unstable neck fracture had not caused my spinal cord to break. That is just incredible. Do you feel like your perception of God and even faith has changed after this experience?
I think it's made me more appreciate every day, because that could have been my last day. But I've got more time now. So I really appreciate every day and try to make a difference every day.
certainly do that. You've got a second book coming out soon. Apparently one wasn't enough. I love that. It's called The Resilient Leader, How to Beat Overwhelm and Burnout for Sustainable Leadership. Now, Amanda, you mentioned you're a pastor as well. And I think this is so timely with, churches coming out finally of kind of lockdowns, pandemics. It's been a really, really difficult time for churches, church leadership. How do you hope this book helps people?
I'm really hoping it gives people some keys to how to look after themselves, and that it's actually important to have that work-life balance, and that looking after yourself isn't being selfish. We need to take time out for our physical health, our emotional health, our social health, if we want to be in a sustainable position to be doing this, running the race with endurance for the whole of our lives and not burning out early. I've even got a chapter I'm going to be writing on how to equip emerging leaders, because I think particularly new leaders can be at risk of feeling they have to prove themselves, do everything, they're asked to do lots of things. But again, if they don't have some time out for themselves, they're really at risk of burning out.
Was that your experience how long have you been a pastor for?
Only a year.
Yeah, okay. So I would say you're definitely still an emerging leader in that space. Did you feel, is this more a book that you wish someone had told you, or?
I've loved being involved in churches in a whole range of leadership roles over many years. And I certainly have had one experience where I was close to burnout and stopped attending a church altogether for a few months, which I found quite unexpected. I was involved with a very small church that was outreaching to a number of newly arrived refugees in our community who had limited English, no transport, all the challenges that you can imagine with new arrivals. And I offered to the pastor that I might be able to find a minibus that the church could borrow to, maybe that would help transport some of these families that had no transport. And I liaised with a local high school where my children were attending and was able to borrow the bus on a weekly basis. So I went back to the pastor with this news, who would you like to drive the bus? And he said, you could do it, couldn't you? And that hadn't been something that I'd particularly wanted to do, but it's very hard to say no when a pastor asks you to do something. So I thought, okay, yeah, I suppose I could. And it meant, picking up the keys on Friday afternoon in school hours, going to the school, getting the bus, unlocking, all that stuff, picking up all the families, which I love to do. But then I was also on the music team. There were only 2 musicians. I was on keyboard and singing, often song leading. I'd be doing the kids' story once a month. I think we were all on a roster or something like that. And at the same time, I was also juggling full-time job at a university, part-time study doing a PhD, 3 young children, husband doing night shift. And so after the end of the school term, when the contract for this bus finished, I just thought, I can't do this. It was just too much. And so I just stopped going to church. And I'm not the sort of person that would ever not go to church. And so I sat at home for a few weeks on Sunday mornings thinking, this is really weird, what's going on? And then I remembered, maybe I could go back to the church I was attending before that I'd been at for years, where I knew a lot of people who could be supportive and nurture me and fill me up a bit. So I did that, went back there. And within a few weeks, I was feeling much, much better. And I realised I'd let my tank, I talk about your own, like a water tank, had got to empty and it hadn't been refilled. And I think part of resilience is knowing how to refill your own tank. So if you're giving out a lot to a lot of other people, you have to make sure there's still ways that your own tank is getting refilled.
A brilliant reminder for us all. Amanda also speaks about compassion fatigue, a relatively new concept in our zeitgeist, but one that a lot of us would be all too familiar with over the last 2 years.
So that's when you have emotional and physical fatigue or exhaustion from the chronic use of empathy, responding to people who are suffering in some way. And I suppose both professionally and working as a leader in a church, you can be in that position of responding empathetically to people that have got challenges, problems, social issues, addictions, a whole range of people with problems come to churches. That's what it's about, a place where the sick can be healed, and we can be responding again and again and again and giving out from that empathy. But it's about if we don't have that self-care and those ways of refilling our own tank, you can actually experience compassion fatigue, and it's like you've run out of empathy. You actually think, I can't listen to one more story where someone needs help because I have no capacity to respond.
And that's so tough, especially when you're an empathetic person. It feels like you've lost your heart.
Yes.
It's like, what's wrong with me? But you're saying it's a completely normal thing to experience.
Yeah, I think it's when you've been in that position of giving out, but there hasn't been anything that's putting into your life. So whether that's replenishment for you from your own group of friends, whether you've had some teaching or input into you that's helping to sustain you emotionally, psychologically, in every way.
I think the church as a whole can have a real problem with this because obviously you serve because you want to serve God, and you serve and serve and serve and serve until you can't anymore. Do you think that there is a correlation between kind of that mindset and that compassion fatigue and burning out?
Absolutely. I think also with serving God, there's the capacity to do things in your own strength, and there's the capacity to do things in God's strength. And I think sometimes we lose sight of doing things with God's enabling, and we're trying to do things in our own strength, and that's when things can really go, that's where you can really get tired and exhausted.
If there's someone listening that is really burnt out, they're feeling like they don't have any more strength, how do you kind of draw on God's strength to sustain you?
That's a good question. I would probably find a trusted friend, maybe another Christian that you could share some of your burden or exhaustion with, and ask that person to pray with you. I also spend time in the Word and be encouraged, particularly in the Psalms, where David seems to have his ups and downs.
A lot more downs.
And do some things that you enjoy. So whether that's going for a walk, looking at a beach, going to see a sunrise, just examining your life and seeing if it's out of balance and if you need to do some more things that replenish you at that point in time. And if that means, well, maybe you need some time off, maybe you need to see a professional counsellor, maybe you need to have some professional supervision. All those things can help get you back to who you are, and so that you're in the best position to do what you want to do.
Fantastic. That's such great advice. Amanda, you've been through a lot in your life. How do you think your accident and this experience has changed who you are?
In some ways, I think I'm just the same me, but it certainly has made me appreciate each day, and I believe God has more for me to do, and that each day is precious, and I look for opportunities every day, whatever I'm doing. Is there a word of encouragement I can give to someone? Is there a conversation I can have with someone that's going to give them hope for the future? Because I find a lot of people have been affected by the last couple of years with COVID, threat of war. There's a lot of things happening in the news that are all bad news. And I just really want to be a person that brings good news and hope every day. And I suppose the fact that I survived a life-threatening injury and accident has made me appreciate the gift of life, and every day I'm thankful for.
Thank you so much to Amanda Nickson for sharing her incredible story. I actually have 3 copies of Amanda's book to give away. To snag one, you simply need to be one of the first 3 people to email the podcast. Visit hopepodcasts.com.au and send feedback to Finding Hope for your chance to win. I'm Georgia, and thank you for listening to this episode of Finding Hope. I'd love to hear your feedback. Send me an email, a review, or share it with your friends. Stories are always better when they're shared, and you never know what someone can learn from another person's journey. If you or someone you know has a story of hope to share, and you'd like to be interviewed for the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment on the Finding Hope page at hopepodcasts.com.au. For now, I'll leave you with this verse. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith. As it is written, the righteous shall live by faith. Romans 1, verse 17. Catch you next time.
This is a Hope 1032 production. Thanks for listening.